desk, yep, that's today. Same as the agenda and diligence. Okay, everyone, welcome to public briefing on Wednesday the 3rd of December. We're very excited to dive into this. So this afternoon we've got a briefing on delegations, then a briefing on policies, and then we will move into a discussion on the District Park Master Plan. So I will hand over to Mr. Steve Gibling to introduce the next two papers, and yeah, I look forward to this discussion.
Thank you, Mayor Lydia. Yes, we've saved the best to after lunch for you. So delegations. So there are two big chunks of work that the team are going to brief you on today. So what we're going to do is talk to you first about the delegations. The team will run through the presentation and then we'll pause for questions at the end of that before we talk about policy framework and the review journey that this organisation's been on over the last 18 months. You've had circulated to you a number of papers, both a cover report for this briefing, which talks a little bit about the background of where we picked up our delegations framework mid of last year, and the process that the team have been through in terms of both identifying the status of our current or our previous delegations framework, but then also looking at where were the gaps, where were the weaknesses, and where do we stack up against other people and other organisations doing similar work in the local government sector, and how did those delegations actually enable us collectively, and also staff in particular, to make the right decision to progress the work that has been committed to by the council. And I think that a really important point to keep in at the front of your mind when we're talking about delegations, these delegations only exist because council has approved a budget and a project. The delegation doesn't exist if there is no budget or no project, and therefore anything outside of that has to come back to council for approval. So these delegations have been set in context of the LTP and our annual plan. So as long as there's a budget there, these delegations inform staff at a variety of levels, and we're giving you the example of what the Chief Executive delegations look like today. But at all levels of the organisation, it gives you some confidence as to how we make decisions and what we escalate up the chain and what ultimately can come back to you, what needs to come back to you because the council set that limit. The team will talk a little bit about that. They'll talk about some of the machinery around delegations, why delegations are there in the first place, what delegations seek to achieve, and then we can answer any specific questions you've got or any general questions you've got about the future use of delegations, and also noting that this is a live document and the work we've put in place to make sure that this delegation is easily accessible and it's not in a Word document filed away somewhere that no one can access. We're trying to share this as much as we can so people can see it real time, and then we can make sure that we're reviewing it real time based on the decisions that are being made. So I'm going to pass over to Sophie and Jody, who are going to walk us through the presentation. So over to you, team.
Thank you, Steve, and hello, councillors. I'll be a new face for you, as most of you will be for me. I'm Jody Becker. I'm the Legal Counsel Policy Compliance, and I've been the lead on both of these two pieces of work. And with me today is Sophie Mears, who's our Senior Legal Counsel support. So it's helpful to start off with a little bit of background, and some of this is already in the paper, but it's helpful to go through it again. What a delegation authority actually is. It's essentially a sharing of a power, a function, a responsibility, or a duty that's held by one individual organisation. It's shared with another individual or organisation. So when we're talking about a delegation of authority, we're typically referring to the sharing of an actual power, so the ability to take action on something or decide something. So delegations matter because they are essentially a key control when managing risks. What they do is they make sure that the decision-making sits with the right roles at the right level with the right oversight. And what this does is essentially helps to protect the organisation against claims that we haven't, that the right person hasn't made the right decision, or we haven't followed the correct process in making the decision. They also help to make it clear what commitments, decisions and actions can be made and by whom and when and under what circumstances. And generally this creates a structure of accountability. So it makes it easier for us to manage our responsibilities, powers and duties that may have been given to us. And it also makes our operations more transparent as well. So when we're looking at delegation setting for both financial and non-financial delegations, we have to consider certain things. So there's control and efficiency, and considerations under both of those that are important to consider when making a delegation of authority. And this is because whatever limits we set or whatever delegations we set, they have effect on our operations. If we don't set levels at the, if we don't set things at the right levels, they'll either increase risks of inefficiency, or they'll, on the converse side, they'll increase risks where we don't have any control. We have low control. So the key to appropriately allocating those risks, so it really is key that we make sure that we allocate these risks at the right levels of the organisation within the organisational hierarchy. So one of the key delegations that an organisation sets, obviously, its financial limits. This is the key control that council has over the decision making of the operations. So why did we initially undertake such a big project? So there are a number of things that constantly drive decision making in an organisation. One of these things is obviously growth, and we are a very fast-growing organisation in a sector that's subject to lots of change, including legislative reform and central government policy. And as we grow as an organisation, this actually changes the number of staff we have, the way that we assign responsibilities and risks within the organisation. We also start doing things differently, which can also trigger a review of whether or not we are assigning risks to the right level, and also the ways that we're working as well. Are we doing things the same way that we did before? That can also factor into decision making. We also have an extensive work program as well that we're trying to deliver. So all these things are drivers of decision making, and therefore require us to look at our limit setting in terms of delegations consistently, really. It is an area of continuous improvement. So we decided that it was a time that we actually took a holistic view of our whole delegations of authority framework, and looked at how we were responding to those drivers and whether we were responding appropriately to them, that were enabling effective and efficient decision making at the operational and also governance levels. So the objective of our review was to essentially come up with a single, comprehensive, clear, enabling and easily managed records of delegations of authority that essentially assisted council to effectively and efficiently deliver on its obligations and functions under various pieces of legislation, while also making sure we were mitigating risks. So our legislative framework in the Local Government Act 2002 is a sort of our overarching framework that we use, that we used in this, and it is our key piece of legislation in this regard. So what this means is, in practice, powers, duties, and responsibilities that are held by the local authority are generally held by the held by the governing body and then delegated to staff. The governing body may delegate powers, not all powers. It has discretion to decide whether or not it will or will not delegate powers, and it can delegate powers to council committees or directly to staff, but also to external bodies and individuals as well, we're permitted to. So a governing body essentially helps the organisation to make efficient operational decisions by making sure that it's giving and delegating the powers that the organisation needs to be able to get on with the operational activities that it needs to do. So the chief executive actually does have responsibilities under the LGA for delegations, and one of those responsibilities is ensuring that all the responsibilities, duties and powers delegated to them or delegated to those employed by the local authority or imposed or conferred by any act, regulation or bylaw are properly performed and exercised. So it is quite common to see in the sector a blanket delegation to the CE for delegations to enable those obligations to be met. So one of the things around best practice delegation management processes is quite similar to policy management in many respects, which is to make sure that the delegations are actually accessible and searchable, so people can actually find them quickly when they need to make a decision. And part of that involves digitisation, and it's also making it really clear what the process is around approval as well, and having a good, robust process and review around what is being proposed. So how did we do it? So what we started off with was assignment of responsibilities for the project management. So the review was led by a member of staff, myself, reporting to a project sponsor, who was one of the executive directors. So the brief was really simple for us. What we had to do was review the delegations and make sure they were compliant with our legislation and also empowered effectiveness from the top down. So we started off with the desktop analysis first and foremost, so that included benchmarking where we were against where other councils were in the sector. And so we looked at all the publicly available delegation manuals around local councils, similar in size to us, our neighbours, but also other councils experiencing the same level of growth at the time, back in 2014. What we also did is we looked at the structure and the way that these were being managed as well. Our initial structure that we had, as you'll see in the papers, was really just a simple, all-encompassing limit for all types of expenditure, whereas what we actually found common in the sector were a separation of CapEx and OpEx, and that was the model that we ended up going to, and which was able to be supported by our financial management system, Magic, as well. So by splitting out those costs, we were actually able to create more effective controls as well around the types of spending compared to our previous model. We also discussed and demoed the management system that we ended up going with, which is a Locosoft platform with other users in the sector as well, to determine whether or not that was the right tool for us and whether it provided us with the accessibility and searchability requirements that we were looking for. So to come up with the limits, myself worked really closely with staff to really understand, and I did this via workshops and face-to-face meetings, both with individual staff, with heads of, and ELT, over sort of a 3-month period, to identify what dollar amounts they were actually dealing with on a day-to-day basis, what types of expenditure they were dealing with in terms of the types of projects, with these maintenance types of contracts, with these strategic types of contracts associated with projects, and sort of what buckets these fell into. And by buckets, we mean the types of expenditure activities that we have currently set up, which are contracts, staffing, leases, those sorts of things. So we worked really hard to identify a structure in limits that enabled some controls, effective controls to be put in place, but also allowed decisions to be made appropriately within the organisation. ELT received schedules for their groups to go over for endorsement before final presentation to the chief executive. And the chief executive's financial limits were essentially informed by where the upper limits of operational staff were sitting. This was then road tested with former council members prior to presentation, just to make sure to assess their level of comfortability with those proposed delegations prior to them being presented in September 2024 for approval. One of the other things that we did to as part of this project, and not just targeted to financial delegation, was to look at all our policy documents, including our delegations manual, in terms of reference, to create a single comprehensive record of all authority. So what we were able to include weren't just some of the legislative delegations that the current delegations manual captured, but also a whole range of operational decision-making authority as well. So what we, to help implement and support the new structure of delegations and also educate staff, we developed a clear policy of delegations of authority, an overarching one, but also we have implemented conditions and limitations around the exercise of financial delegated authority as well. The overarching financial delegation conditions and limitations were implemented shortly after the delegations themselves were approved by Council. The key thing about financial delegations that the conditions and limitations set out is that you have to have a financial delegation for a relevant expenditure activity to be able to exercise that particular authority. And you also but not only that, you also have to have a budget allocated for the project or activity, as Steve said at the beginning. So if you don't actually have a budget for an activity, even if you did have a delegation to exercise it, you wouldn't be able to because there'd be no budget. So to get where we ended up with at the end of 2024, we ended up with some CapEx delegations at the upper limits for the Chief Executive, and these are up on screen for you now. They're also included part of the paper, but essentially the maximum limit that the Chief Executive can approve in terms of capital expenditure is 3 million. And it's very similar, the upper limit too, for the Chief Executive for financial delegations in terms of operational expenditure is also 3 million. So what does this look like now in terms of current benchmarking? We're currently in a process of assessing, as part of a continuous improvement program around delegations of authority. We've taken an initial benchmarking exercise around how that's looking like now in the sector, to inform whether or not we need to make any amendments or changes to the current limits. So as you can see here, what this table represents is it compares the maximum amount for the equivalent roles across the sector, acting in their capacity alone. There are some councils which have a dual council and CE limit, which is higher than what the CE might be able to approve by themselves, but this table was just focused purely on what the Chief Executive and individual ELT members can approve in their sole capacity. So, as you can see here, if we were to compare this with Queenstown Lakes District Council, which is probably comparable in terms of growth to us, in terms of trajectory, we are sitting slightly below them. So breaking this down a little bit further so we can compare the application of council limits to our structure, we see, if we were to take a couple of examples from our delegations in terms of CapEx contracts and CapEx contracts, you'll be able to see there that the Chief Executive is still definitely sort of middle of the range compared to the council surveyed. And similar for OPEX as well. We are sitting slightly higher compared to one or two other councils in terms of OPEX, but overall still middle of the range there.
I might just jump in there. Like, I think it's important because the benefit of benchmarking is it's every council has to operate under the same piece of legislation, and so every council is doing the same type of work, which is contracts, it's capital expenditure, it's maintenance, it's making sure the lights are on and things are running. And so it's largely a reflection of the size and the scope of the business that they're running for the community that they're serving. And that's why this benchmarking is really interesting, because we've tried to get a benchmark against growth councils, but when you're the fastest growing council, it's hard to look at partners beside you, or we might be looking up in the North Island, or we're looking somewhere else, or we're looking at a large metro. So what we've done is we've tried to apply a bit of a regional approach, but we've also tried to find some other people who are dealing with the same growth challenges that we have got, because ultimately this is all coming down to decision making to implement council's long-term plan. And it comes back to that point: if it's not on the long-term plan, this doesn't make any sense. And so it's about how we can get that balance of real good controls for the right places at the right level, but also enabling an efficient delivery of a decision you've already passed, or the council's already passed. So that's the bringing together of that balancing act of the seesaw of control versus efficiency in relation to your piece of work for your community at that point in time.
So where we got to so far, and how far we progressed on our project journey. So what we have been implemented and stood up is a new delegation software management system. We've fully populated all the financial delegations into that. So those are now easy search. Those now can be searched easily and found and managed. We have delivered training on the new financial delegation structure and the exercise of financial delegations to staff to increase their understanding and application of the new structure. We are updating our current processes around delegation management for increased oversight and efficiency, and recently completed, linked to this project, but part of the hygiene project led by the finance team, is we've also updated Magic to reflect capital expenditure and operating expenditure limits. So that aligns really well with our new structure. So again, there's some system control around the exercise of delegations that we've managed to implement as well. So the delegations register itself is a tool to manage the delegation is a tool for us to manage who has what delegation, who made the delegation, and when the delegation was made. Its limitations are as it doesn't actually tell us any more information than that. But what it does do is it does make delegations much easier to find and much more searchable. So if we want to know when a delegation was made and by whom, the system will tell us. So the structure of the financial delegations reflect what was approved by Council back in September 2024. So we have modules which essentially include all the delegates within them and their limits. What we also have now is we have the ability to generate certain reports, so we can easily generate lists of officer-specific delegations. So if we wanted to know what a particular role has in terms of financial and soon non-financial delegations, we can easily generate that. So we can easily educate and orientate new staff and starters and promulgate any changes more effectively. So what next for us is being able to fully populate the whole system that we have employed with non-financial delegations as well. And this is scheduled to be completed by end of 2025. There'll be delivery of training on the new financial delegations similar to what the financial delegations were. And this will begin toward the end of this year, and then also during the first quarter of 2026. And we'll develop additional training to follow, which we'll be able to put up on Compass and other mechanisms to educate staff. We'll also do a review of our financial delegations and their implementation to identify any areas of improvement or amendment, given that these have now been in place for a 12-month period. Non-financial delegation project completion and implementation report is scheduled for February 2026, and we're also looking at what exception reporting looks like as well for Council.
So the probably only other thing just to note for councillors is that you do have access to Locosoft and our delegations platform. So you can actually drill into the full detail if you wish to entertain yourselves.
I'll email the link around.
Perfect. Yeah.
So for questions, we'll go to Elizabeth first.
They might be stupid questions, but just bear with. Approving OPEX jointly, who did the other councils use? Because you just gave a brief mention that you found that when you were doing some of your analysis work. When I say use, I'm talking about internally, whether it's from committees, etc.
Well, there are delegations set at various levels, so there will be certain delegations delegated to certain council committees. A former audit and risk committee had certain delegations given to it in terms of decision making, particularly around insurance, if I recall correctly. So those types of things can be delegated to committees. Were you wanting an example of what other powers can be delegated, like to ELT and staff? Is that what you're wanting?
No, it was what you were checking on there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So so powers can be delegated to committees of council. And community boards as well.
Okay. So in terms of the link that Lydia's going to send us, will that show us the decisions that Sharon's approved annually between, so if we wanted to look at something between 2 and 3 million, we'd be able to just put in the search bar and it would come up for the decisions she's made in the last 12 months. So we could see what those delegations look like.
Yeah, so the delegations register only records like who has made a delegation. So if the CE's made a delegation to a staff member, it will record that in their limit. It doesn't have any records around the exercise of those delegations themselves.
Yeah, I think where you're probably heading with that question, Elizabeth, is that's where I think the financial reporting and a range of other tools, including the increased reporting around procurement, the reporting on exceptions, these are some of the areas where you'll start to see some of those things occur, but they will only occur if it's above the limit. I guess that's that balance of efficiency and control. If you've set the limit, you're expecting people to operate within the limit, not above it. And if they operate above, then we'll report back.
Sure. I guess I was just looking for kind of stats on where the main decisions are being made that are at that. So are we looking at, is it transport or was it water, that kind of thing. 3, could we potentially have a paper to us next year, obviously doing a review, so that we could potentially review the delegations? Is that an option?
As part of, and it might be the best place as to where we bring this back, but certainly these delegations have been in place for about 14 months now. And as Jodie's talked to, we are going to be reviewing actually, has it worked, are the limits right from our point, but we could bring back the result of that, and that might be the point where you want to ask any other questions or other advice from the Chief Executive.
I guess what I was meaning is the opportunity for the council to make amendments to the delegations if we feel that there's some areas we'd like to.
I think that's probably the point in time we'd do that.
Yep. Okay, great. Would a control of having 2 elected members from, say, maybe audit and risk on certain approvals above a certain amount potentially give us the good, healthy balance? So it's not having to delegations above a certain amount and always coming back to full council?
Yeah, I mean, co-signing is always an option. It depends on the delegation, I suppose, and the risk involved. And again, it's that control efficiency. Is that the right approach to manage that delegation? But yeah, co-signing is an option for delegations. Yeah.
Okay. Right. So, discretionary spending. I'm not sure what the CE's discretionary spending looks like, what her budget is that something that we're able to see, or is discretionary spending completely private?
In terms of a delegation, I don't have visibility over the exact budget for that. So I'm not quite sure if I'd be able to,
Okay.
from the information we have on the delegations, what we hold, I'm not quite sure we'll be able to give you budget information.
Yeah, sure. So if I just give you an example and you can tell me how this fits into the delegations. The CE was able to approve help me, Tracy, with the name of the rugby pitch on Friday we're visiting. Marta 2. So that was found out by council. So that was obviously within her delegation's capacity. Didn't need to come back to full council. For us to have the oversight of decisions like that, what would be best practice from what you've reviewed from other councils, so that there is that happy balance between what comes back to council, not necessarily for approval, but at least for some understanding versus approval?
Some of that will be just general reporting in terms of if there has been any direction of council to undertake a particular to go ahead with a particular item, then reporting back to council that's been completed. So it's sort of through that reporting mechanism. Again, it would be direction of council, what it is they'd like to see come back. So, but most of that would be done through reporting. If it was under the limit, and council just want assurance that it's been completed, then it would just be reporting.
Thank you.
I was talking with Steve earlier, and I wondered whether it might be helpful. There was a document from the 17th of September, so one of our last previous council meetings, that had all of the delegations in one space for the chief executive for executive leadership team, and I just wonder whether it might actually be helpful was getting that into one space and actually sharing that with councillors. I know that you have your online register, but there's a lot in there, but I think maybe it might just give a level of comfort to councillors if they actually just have that information right in front of them. Because one of my questions from that back in September was the donation and sponsorship delegation, and I thought, well, are we spending that? Turns out no, we're not. But so why is it there? Are there delegations that are that need removed and inefficient for use? Because if we have a delegation there, then it would be my thought that we would be budgeting for that delegation. But if we're not actually using it and spending it, then we don't need it there. Yeah. So I guess maybe that's part of that review. Space that you guys will go through.
Yeah, look, one of the things we'll do as part of our review will be to test the delegations on each of the areas that we've identified. And we will, like if we haven't used it, we will raise the question of do we need it? Because there's no point having a delegation if you don't need it, or if it doesn't relate to a component of your approved budget. And as we're going through budget setting, roughly around the same time that we're going to start setting our possibly resetting our delegations with that context in mind. I think early in the new year might be the right time to come back with an answer on the detail around that, because then we can answer in detail how much donation and sponsorship spend have we got, and to what degree have we come close to tripping the threshold on some of those delegations. And I think the delegation for the chief executive is relatively high, and we probably haven't got anywhere near that. So, but again, let me come back with the team with some detail on that in the new year.
Yeah. So, is it possible to get that list?
Sure.
To send away with councillors before Christmas, so that people can go through and digest and bring back their thoughts when we do that review, so they're pre-prepared on that situation. Yeah. Cool. Thank you, Reece.
Kind of killed me off there. Thanks, Stephen. This will be to you. I guess it's addressing the holistic, not whether it's a $3 million delegation. You've said that you've offset that against like councils, apples for apples. There's been a lot of talk around this, and I guess for me, really simple acid test is how many $3 million delegations or decisions have been made. You'd probably be the one that would know that outright. When those are made, is it checked in with you, Lydia? And are we doing 10 a month? Are we doing none? Are we a month? Are we just an acid test on? And you're saying, I can bring this, but I'm not so interested in the types of delegations that you're talking about in the list. I'm talking about the wanting to understand that dollar figure that's being discussed or signed off.
Yeah.
And that's fine. Against the ops or capex or whatever, but are we sharing that at least within a level of the boss versus it's just signed off and we've got 12 of them a month? And just trying to understand that level.
I think that's at the heart of it. It's a really great question, because what it does talk to is why did we set $3 million? And I'll probably throw to Tim to talk about the number. But prior to throwing to Tim to talk about the number, in terms of the context, I think the key point here is that council's already made a decision to do that project. And that project may be a $3.5 million, it might be a $10 million, it could be a $20 million project. You've approved that through your decision-making process. You've gone through consultation because it's in the long-term plan. So you've made the approval that you want that thing to happen. It's then to what degree do you want to keep coming back and reapproving what you've already approved? And so that's where we've then looked at the quantum of the volume or the size of the contracts that generally sit within, and this generally sits within Tim's area. And then we're trying to get the balance to go, there's a point where we think, that's feeling a bit close. Yeah, we want to push this through to council just to tell you we're going to spend some more money on this thing you want us to do. But we're also going, actually, do you want to keep deciding on this one thing that you've already told us you want to do and you want us to get on and do it? And so that's the balancing act from a layman's point of view. But I'll throw to Tim, who's actually doing it.
Yeah,
doing
so Steve has explained that really well. If I was going to add anything, it would be so the majority of the budget sits with me, and the majority of the large contracts sit with me. So, Reece, your question as to how often does it happen? Quite often. So, I'll give you an example. So, a few weeks ago, you guys approved the award of the Hoskins Road contract. Now, part of the recommendations there were to delegate to me as the executive director to be able to manage the contract on the day-to-day basis. So that would be things like contract award, purchase orders, things like that. I've got a purchase order sitting with me at the moment that's for just north of $4 million that I can approve because this council has given me delegation to do that. If we were to come back every time we needed approval for a purchase order or for the award of contract, after we've already bought the approval to award the contract to council, we would be here a lot and we'd be taking up quite a bit of your time. What has a much lower delegation for myself is things like variations, and that's quite important. So just the day-to-day management of the contract, the award of contract and PO, no big deal once you guys have seen it and approved that. It means that me and my team can manage that on a day-to-day. But a variation would suggest that something has happened and we need more money, and that would almost always come back to you. I've got a very low delegation for that, and Jody will confirm, but I think it's something like, in fact, I think for Sharon it's $500,000. It's low. So I think the delegation process works well. It means that everything comes through you, to Steve's point. Everything comes through council in regard to approval of the award of contract. But then it gives me and my team the ability to actually manage the day-to-day in regard to that. Other than variations. If there are variations, you'll see those come back to you because the delegation is really low.
And I think, thank you, both of you, that was actually my point. So I let it go out, and it was more for the group. $3 million is, exactly right. If we've agreed on it, more than happy for that to be it. I was more interested in the quantum, and that's why I was saying there's an acid test that goes with that, and the variations is absolutely understandable. That is now we're off budget. We're now off agreement. Now we're in. So it wasn't. I'm not too concerned about that dollar value. I was more worried about. Well, not worried. More interested in where we set that number, how we got there, and what that frequency is. So you've answered it. Thank you.
I think I just looked up, Tim, the delegation is 70k for a variation to contract. So it's in that space, and I think what is also just to from what Stephen talked about is, I think what is really important is actually from this morning is our maturity in reporting. So we set our annual plan, we set our budget for the year and say these are the things that we wish you to do. And then actually it's the maturity of the reporting back to the Finance and Performance Committee that I think is really important in that, because that is where you start to see the accumulation of any changes in delivery budgets and CapEx. So yeah, you can see where things are going off, but yeah, noting that the delegations. Sorry, but I'll stop talking. Tracy.
Can you just explain the exceptional reporting to me?
That's currently under development, so I'm not quite...
Sorry, no. What does it mean?
Exception reporting will just basically show where a delegation's been exercised potentially outside of the limit. There might be justifications for why that was, and there may not be. So it will just be demonstrating anything that has exceeded the set limit or delegation.
So just with audit and risk hat on, how do you audit, or what plan have you got for spot checking delegations, or does the system prevent somebody, if somebody is trying to log a delegation for which they don't have a budget or something like that, does the system block that? Do you understand what I'm asking?
Yeah,
Cool.
For financial delegations, yes, the system does block if you're trying to exercise a delegation which exceeds your maximum. It will essentially block that. Yes.
Great. And the last one is just, I understand about going to other like-minded organisations because of the particular framework that local government works under. So I'm looking at both of you, but I can't do it with one eye each. How did you determine that the ones you were looking at themselves were operating under best practice? Because you can follow people who are the same growth pressures, the same size, but they could be doing their delegations poorly. So I'm just asking how you did that part. Thank you.
Yeah, it's a great question. When we first started, one of the things we did is we worked with the LocoSoft developers who have been working with about 20 councils around the country, and we asked them, okay, so who are the superstars in this space? And they gave us a couple of reference points that we benchmarked ourselves against to that point of who's doing this really well. And then we also looked at who are the top 4 growth councils and who has got a relevant or a relative size population dealing with the same sort of things on the same volume. And so we kind of used a couple of streams to figure out who do we benchmark ourselves against. I think it'd be fair to say I think we're all probably at various stages, and we change with elections and staff members as well, and new technology and old tech. And certainly for a council that's grown like us, operating it, moving it away from a Word document to something like this where it's more searchable and it's in a central place that only a few people can actually control. I think they are all the sorts of moves to around the maturity of an organisation.
Yep, that's great. Thank you.
Cool. Samuel.
Hi. Couple of points, and then I'll throw some questions. It's not so much the figure; it's what it's spent on. Community have got pretty grumpy over some small numbers in the past, and more to the fact that perhaps this chamber was not aware of that expenditure happening. And another point, the comment was made earlier that we've approved the long-term plan and the annual plan. Well, 2 of us in this room might have, the rest of us didn't. On November the 11th, I was told that the CE had delegated financial authority of $1 million. So that's a bit of a change. If it's 3 million now, or is that what we're proposing it change to?
No, this was the delegation limits that the council set back in September 2024, and the paper is attached to the pack that council agreed. So that the advice, I don't know to what degree the advice or what delegation specifically was, but I can talk to you afterwards about just understanding that.
Cool. That'd be cool. Because none of those figures match that email. Tier 3, 100k, tier 4, 50,000. Yeah, no, they don't seem to add up to anything. Cool. Thank you.
Thanks. Just a couple of queries, clarification really. It notes that the CE can sub-delegate, but that sub-delegated person cannot sub-delegate. But you're silent on whether another person the council may delegate can sub-delegate. Are they able to do that or not?
Under the LGA, where council delegates to an officer, so in this case, everything is pretty much delegated to the CE. The CE is able to make a delegation to another officer, but that officer who receives that delegation is unable to make any further delegations. It's only where council delegates directly to another member of staff where that member of staff is able to sub-delegate, but that's only if council permits that sub-delegation. So
I understand that. So let's say we've delegated, just choosing you, for example. I've delegated to you to do some things. You're going to be away on holiday for a month. You're able to delegate to you, but then are you able to delegate to Steve, for example? No, he's going up the chain, but you know what I mean. How far can because you've excluded the CE from going down and down the chain, but you're silent on whether another person can go down and down the chain.
Yeah, so when there's a staff member that holds a delegation and that staff member is absent, what they do then is they appoint someone to act in their role. So they're acting, and so the person who steps into that role then essentially is able to exercise the delegations of that role. And so if that delegate was able to make a sub-delegation, then that person stepping in an acting role would be able to make that sub-delegation as if they were that original staff member. But that's the only way in which essentially someone who doesn't have that position would be able to exercise that position if they're sort of in an acting capacity.
That's good, thank you.
Yeah.
In the paper in September 2024, there were 3 options put forward. Option 1 was the preferred one, but the paper doesn't tell us whether that was the one that was adopted. I presume that it was. Is that the case?
Let me double check that and get back to you.
Yeah, and then because I think that one mentioned there was reporting obligations to make sure we were kept informed, and we've talked, that's come up a number of times, so I think that is the important part. It's not so much, like Reece said, worrying too much about what the level was, but when there's something that we should know about it, we should know about.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's good. So my last question, and it sort of touches on some of the things that have come up as well. When we make savings on a budget, how do we ensure that as much as possible we capture those savings, that we don't just, they're not just redirected to somewhere else in the budget to add bells and whistles, for example, without the council having some input, because you've delivered on the project, you've saved some money. Technically, you could still be delivering on the project by adding some fancier furniture or a new TV screen in the meeting room or whatever, but we're in an environment where we want to show that we're saving money and operating efficiently and prudently.
That might more come through the way in which we progress our capital reporting, not just on a financial basis, but also on a completion of the activity basis. Yeah. And Tim touched on that this morning about the work that his team are doing around that. Again, a little bit of water to go on the bridge before we can get to that, but I think the intent is there. Tim, do you want to add anything to that answer?
I think that's good, Steve. And the team did talk about it today, and we have spoken about it in the deep dives as well. It's a bit of a mindset shift. moving away from that focus on the budget and moving towards value and looking at how we can be commercially more astute and identify opportunities. And you can see it in the reporting and the KPIs we have focused on, and I know we've spoken about this, on budget spend rather than on opportunity to reduce cost. So if your question's from a financial perspective around the mechanics of how those savings actually find their way back, we'll probably need to get finance to respond to that. But certainly from a direction to the team around not moving money around budgets, and it makes it really difficult, for example, to determine our cost performance when we move money from this budget to that budget. So we've been really clear with the teams that we don't do that, and we look for the opportunity to be more efficient with our budgets.
Yeah, no, thank you. That it was the latter, more of everyone having the mindset that we look to save money as much as we could possibly before we redirect. Brilliant, thank you.
A bit of it might come down to our budget setting through annual plan and long-term plan too. Aaron, to just tighten that up a little bit. John.
Thank you. So if we've got a project, from my understanding, the project will have various components with a dollar amount in a purest, simple sense attached. So if the project's approved, is there a need for somebody to have the delegation to the extent of some of the delegations? Because if the planning is done well, the costing is done well, which I'm sure they are, then approving the project should save a lot of time, because all the approvals are there. And I suppose the concern that I have is that if I approve within budget, it means that I'm taking from A and allocating to D, which then means how do B, C and E get on?
Let me have a crack at answering that one, John. I think I understand what you're asking. So essentially, you approving a project doesn't make the project actually happen. That's what the staff do. And so from an operational point of view, our team need to be given a level of decision making and authority to go, I can enter into contracts, I can commission and commit to work up to a certain dollar value. But if the project, for whatever reason, changes and we exceed that dollar value, that then comes back. So it's about the operationalisation of your decisions that you've asked for and decided on. So that's the first part. And I think Tim's probably answered the second part, is how do we manage trade-offs between A and E and D and C and B, as that's where our financial and performance reporting is moving to. So it's not just financial, it's also percentage of delivery. So hopefully I've answered those two questions for you.
No, thank you, Steve. And the second issue is no issues with the delegations, and we can spend all week deciding on what the dollar amounts should be, and I'm sure we're not going to. So I suppose what I'm having difficulty trying to have a degree of confidence about is how do we know that the operational, I suppose somebody used the term, might have been you, Steve, the maturity of the organisation. So I'm just having a little bit of difficulty about having confidence that the level of maturity for the organisation is that these delegations will be followed, whatever they are. And I suppose a collateral to that is that exception reporting, in my mind, and I'm not very good financially, that one of the things is that there shouldn't really be any exceptions because it's really a breach.
Yeah, that's a good point. So in terms of exception reporting, I think this probably is going to land more in the world of procurement. And that might be where, if we hit a certain threshold and our policy says you've got to go 3 contracts or 3 tenders, but actually we know that the work's unique and we can put a rationalisation over it to say there's only one person that can really do this, we can't get 3. That would be an example of a variation. And I've used those in previous councils, so I understand that would probably be where the exception reporting occurs. The exception reporting will potentially, that's the bounce up, but that's what we're looking at now, is what does that actually look like when we start to bring delegations and procurement together, and also the work around the better financial reporting around the capital projects. It's the combination of a lot of things that we're working on at the moment to try and tighten up the business and the machinery of our council. So you're right, like an exception, if you breach the delegation, or actually that's a breach, we would then need to have an explanation as to why we did that. But I think it's the combination, John, we're probably talking about here.
Thank you, John. Big Red.
Right, here we go. Might be against a few of yours, but Tim and Lydia, Stephen Reese, they answered a lot of it. From experience, don't be afraid to raise the level of the dollar amount they can spend to make the ship go faster. I've had it personally where I've gone from the day I changed it from someone from $200 to $5,000. It just saved probably 10 phone calls a week. That is all.
Thanks, Tracy.
Mine's just a quick one. John, this morning when we were talking about the terms of reference, you raised a point, and it was about changing the wording in the general principles re-delegation to do with the word unlimited, and I just wondered if that was still something that was important to you, because this was where we were going to bring that up.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, and I suppose looking at the delegations of the September 25, that it's got there under the financial management treasury that there's approved new and refinanced lending activity with the CCO and the CCTO up to an unlimited amount. So if it's new, I can't see how it might be a little bit simple, how it could be within budget.
Treasury management delegations, they don't fit within the 12 expenditure delegations, the 12 categories of expenditure delegations. So they sit outside of the 12 categories that we've set up in terms of capital expenditure. So they're their own distinct category.
So because they're outside, it's okay.
It might be. It's a fairly technical question, and we don't have anyone from the finance team in the room. But I'm going to hazard a guess, and I'm mindful I'm guessing. But this relates to the transition decision that the council has passed. And so, what I think, if we can take that question offline, John, to actually make sure that there was actually a council decision that actually did set the limit. It's just the machinery underneath it. I just need to double check and probably need to look at that information in particular.
Because specifically, without sort of hammering Wisco, it just seems to me that if you've got approving new and it is the Selwyn Water Limited up to an unlimited amount, well, you'll need to do CPR.
Denise.
Okay, I'm going to try and word this. I was looking at the Appendix 2 September 2024 Council meeting, and it says on there that it will inform the review of GL codes, so GL codes can be created to reflect authority for particular activities. Can I ask if that has happened and if we followed through on what was put on there?
Yes, that project was happening was sort of underway as when we were doing the delegations, and they sort of tied into each other. So the new categories of expenditure activities that we created informed the GL codes that that finance have created to consolidate and condense, so they can be mapped more easily against the delegation. So when someone does have a delegation of authority given to them for a particular activity, there are particular GL codes that get allowed access, so people can exercise the delegations against those particular GL codes, so we can track that way when delegations are being exercised.
Okay, so they won't be lost in the thousands. There's like new ones for new projects that are coming on.
We don't have anyone from finance here to probably answer that level of detail, and I don't have that level of detail myself either. But my understanding is that there was a significant piece of work done to try and consolidate as much as possible the GL codes and to align those to match with the current categories that we have for expenditure activities.
Thank you.
Cool. All right. Thank you. I think, everyone will look forward. We'll get those that information to you before Christmas, so you can take that away and just have a look at what those delegations look like, and all in one place as well. I'm just noting that we're going over the 2-hour mark, since you have all been sitting in your seats, so we may break for 15 or 10 if you can. Happy to take guidance. 10? Cool. Please give us 10, and we'll see you back for policy.
So the second project that the teams are working on is obviously review and development framework for our policies. So to start off with, I'll just go through why policy matters, the review that we went through in the framework journey, which is a similar process to the delegations, the meta policy and broadly what that covers, and also how we're managing policy now under the new framework. So policy matters because it assists with our compliance and regulatory obligations, so it makes those clear and transparent so people understand what they are and enables better compliance with those. It also means that we can support the likelihood of a favourable audit result. Policies and processes are very key and crucial to audit processes for in a lot of instances. They also help support planning exercises because they give direction around how those planning exercises might need to occur. It also just generally provides clear and consistent direction and sets very clear expectations regarding behaviour and working standards. So what we had previously, before we've implemented the new meta policy, is we had a very underdeveloped policy management system compared to what I guess you would expect, compared to what best practice policy management standards would look like. And so some of the issues that we had under the old system, and the reason why it was underdeveloped was transparency. So making policy available both internally and externally was quite difficult. It was difficult to find information and policy information. There was a lack of clarity over whether a particular version that you were looking at was the current version or whether it had been superseded. There were instances where we had different versions available and it wasn't quite clear which one was the one that was in place. And also, again, with accountability. So good policy management. Our previous policy management style was quite ad hoc, and we'd sort of assign individuals to deal with policies as and when they came up. So we had no clearly defined structure or ways to actually assign those. It was very ad hoc and based essentially who had capacity at the time. And we didn't clearly define what the responsibilities of those policy leads were when we're doing it ad hoc. So all this was increasing the risk that we would have inconsistency in decision making, or again slowing down our decision making. So the new framework that we implemented is more developed and aligns with what would be considered sort of best practice industry standards, and it supports us to successfully mitigate compliance risk and support operational decision making and efficiency. So we've developed this with the Public Records Act and other key pieces of legislation in mind. We've dedicated specific staff members and identified what the expectations are for those staff members when they're in terms of the policy review. We've also got a clear and systemic delegation around policy management responsibilities. And we also providing drafting support and guidance. So there is actually support for people to undertake their policy review responsibilities. So the meta policy, what that essentially covers is it covers off really clear definitions around what is a policy, what is a framework, what is a procedure, and sort of gives a guidance of when to use these most effectively. It also identifies when we should be reviewing a document or developing a new one. It sets out a clear document hierarchy, so essentially anything direction that council issues binds all the decision-making levels below it. So we have to make sure our operational policies are consistent with any direction of council. And then we also have some more structure around currency and review periods and how to set those, and what the review and development life cycle is, all to help us better manage our policy responsibilities. So the system that we have in place, we have developed this on our port system, and currently the policy directory is available internally for staff. We do have an updated website coming that will make policies with a public interest element in them available to the public. and we can show you what that looks like probably early in the new year. But this directory is essentially the source of truth, similar to the delegations register, to find the most current version of a policy that has been approved. And there's increased accessibility and searchability functions within this, so you can search in a number of ways, including keyword search, as well as A to Z, and also within functional groups as well. The other component of the policy directory is what we call the policy register. So the register is essentially our back-end engine room. So this is where we essentially maintain records of all the versions of our policies, and where the editable versions of a policy can be accessed by members of staff, shared and published as well. We've also done some automation of workflows and reminders to people that have been assigned policy management responsibilities, so they know when things are coming up, and to help them as well, I guess, plan for the review of those documents within their existing work programs. The other thing that we've created to help ELT members, because they are ultimately responsible for the review of documents within their groups, is create the creation of dashboards, so they can have a quick and easily accessible view of all the documents that they've got within their portfolios, the status of those, and who is responsible for those, so they can easily ask the questions that they need to around how reviews are progressing. And as discussed, we'll be launching a new website soon that's facing to the public, that enables the public to search policies similar to the way staff can. What we've also implemented too is reporting around policy review. What we have started to, starting with the commencement of the project in June 2024, is give ARC an overarching report on policy review progress. And we've also started sending out group reporting to individual ELT members, so they get monthly updates as to what policies are overdue for review and coming up for review, so they can stay on top of it as well. And in 2025, well, by the end of this year, we want to be able to embed the policy management as a standing agenda item at the group leadership level, so at ELT meetings, either at ELT meetings and as well as within senior leadership within the groups as well. So policy management just becomes an embedded part of BAU function and how we manage our responsibilities going forward. And that's essentially all I have to say on the policy framework.
Super speedy. Thank you. Sarah?
So when will all policies sort of be up to date and we be working on this new system?
Yeah, so we have a program of work, because we started off with a number of policies that were very overdue, quite a number of them, and so we've got a program of work to try and make sure that all the policies that were identified as overdue by June 2025 next year, to have all of those up to date and current.
Great, awesome. And other question is, policies that are in the public interest, is that something that is legally bound, or how do we decide?
No, so so essentially with the meta policy, we have some guidance around when something should be approved by council, and essentially and so those policies that are approved by council, they generally require a level of consultation on them, so those automatically sort of get made available because there will be a legislative basis to do so and make those available. Other policies will be operational ones, but they will be ones that on topics that we've ever had like Lagoima things on, so those nature, or we might require something of them, or they set out a process. So those ones, while they might not be approved by council, they still have there's probably relevant information for the public for them. So there's a number of those that we've decided to make public as well, but we can make more or less available.
Our aim is, because we're spending public money, our aim is to try and push as many of these policies out, so that people can see how we do things around here.
Cool.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah. Kia ora again. So previously, when we were looking at delegations, we've handily had the link round to Local with where the delegations and stuff can be found. When I look on the port, we can't see the policies registered. So other than on the website, apologies if I missed it, is there anywhere else that we can see what the current policies are?
Yeah, anything that's council approved will be uploading into Diligent, probably as part of the resource page. But other than that, yeah, there'll be the public facing website for councillors. But at any time, councillors can ask to see a particular policy, and we can provide a version of that to them.
Yeah, I have tried looking in Diligent, and I might be missing it, so I will try and look again.
No, we will be putting those. We will be uploading those. They're probably not in there at the moment. They will be.
I guess the other part is if we don't have a list, then we don't know what we're asking for. And I know that there were some policies that were still under development at the end of the last triennium that hadn't come to council, but potentially they were operational policies. And again, without a list, it's a bit hard to know where they're at. So it would be really handy if somewhere there could be like a list with a table.
Yeah.
Some sort of progress, because we're all interested.
We want to make sure that this, again, we're trying to get that radical transparency piece going, and we really want to make sure that you can see these. So we'll talk with the team after this as to how we might give you the most efficient access possible, so you can see what we're doing.
Thanks, Steve. Elizabeth.
So the regular high-level updates will be to the Audit and Risk Committee, but that only gives those on the Audit and Risk Committee the opportunity to respond. Just wondering if there's a mechanism for it to come back to full council from time to time, so that we can potentially, if there's some changes being made to a policy, I could foresee it could be of interest to the whole council.
Yeah, I think we'll take that on advice, and I'll have a chat to the team to see how we might bring that into a more regular report back on the function. And I know there's there's a couple of other matters that come out of audit and risk that actually have council interest. I think health, safety and wellbeing as well. So I'll see how we might do that, and whether or not that's best done through the chair's report to council.
Yeah, I'd agree. I think around processes that after an audit and risk meeting, there should be a chair's report that comes to council of the things that have actually been discussed and happened in there that are of interest to council, and noting that everybody has the information for audit and risk subcommittees as well, so you all have oversight into what is going, and if you have particular concerns, what might be something good is you do raise that with one of the members of audit and risk, and they can carry those concerns for you in that space. Denise.
Hi. Reading on here, it's got ELT have agreed to a hybrid model of policy management, part centralised and part decentralised. And then it talks about training being done for ELT and their PAs, and anyone new to the positions of policy management responsibilities. Has that been done? And can you tell us a bit more about the hybrid model?
Yes, to all three of those.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's good.
So the hybrid model is right back at the very beginning of the project, where we described the different types of policy management models. So the hybrid model essentially consists of, there is a dedicated centralised resource, like a dedicated centralised policy repository, and a dedicated resource to, I guess, coordinating and providing oversight of the policy management activities. And then the decentralised part is essentially the responsibilities around the actual review of those individual documents are distributed out to members of staff.
Lovely. And then my next question, I think you've covered it, was about the website. So that is underway and ongoing to get that more visible, because I know at one point there was something like 120 policies that were not fit for purpose. So have we managed to amalgamate them a bit, or?
Yeah, so yes, there are a number of, one of the reasons why we had so many policies overdue is that we had a number of policies on a similar topic, and so part of the review is to look at how we can consolidate a number of statements that we've made in separate policies into one policy that comprehensively covers that same topic. So that is part of that process that we go through when we review policies. Yeah.
Lovely, thank you.
Cool. Any other questions on policy? Look at that, team. You've done well to time, and I think one of my colleagues here was just saying to me, I think we've channeled our inner Deborah Hassan today, who has spent 10 plus, even 30 years trying to get to this space of where we're at today. And so, I think it's something that we can be really proud of today. It's good. Policy and delegation manual. Done. Briefed. Cool, thanks team. We really appreciate the work that you've done on this, and it's quite a complex topic too, so thank you. All right, we'll move on to the briefing of the district park, and so I'll welcome Mark Rikers and team up to the table. Cool, welcome team. I think this is almost a little bit long awaited from some of us that have returned from the last triennium, and will be a good discussion topic for those that are new around this table. So the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good afternoon, councillors. So we are today providing a briefing on the Selwyn's District Park Master Plan, and this follows on from the November infrastructure deep dive briefing we had earlier on. With me is Mark Rikers, our Open Spaces Asset Manager, and also Hugh Shepherd, our Project Manager for Major Projects, who will lead us through this presentation. And we'll start with Mark and then hand over to Hugh after that.
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity to come along and talk about the Selwyn District Park today. As you say, it's been a long time coming, and we've been working on this project for quite some time, so it's good to come along and get it in front of council. Today, we just wanted to give you a bit of an update, some of the planning history around the park, the sort of origins of it, where it came from. It's been a long time in progress, and also the proposed program going forward. We also wanted to introduce the draft master plan concepts, which we've been working on for some time, and also provide some information on our potential community consultation engagement plan that we're looking to get underway next year. And also just talk about the project governance structure that we're proposing to put in place. That's what we wanted to cover today. So the first thing is just around the origins of the park. I think some of you may have seen some of this before when Murray presented a little bit of information in terms of the deep dive that was done a little while ago. So apologies if I'm covering some of the stuff that you've already seen. But so the district park, it was a project identified in the Rolleston Structure Plan back in 2009. So Rolleston Structure Plan was a key planning initiative to provide some structure around how Rolleston was going to develop at that time. It was identified as a large tract of land. It was under the airport noise contour, so it couldn't be developed for standard residential development. And it was, I guess, an aspirational idea to secure some land that could be developed into a park, a large-scale park that would encompass a whole lot of different things into the future. So we're now 16 years down the track from then, and in the period between the structure plan and now, we have done a lot of planning work around this. So we did a open spaces strategy back in 2015, and that was the catalyst for that was just the residential growth in the district, so many more people pouring in, particularly after the earthquakes, and trying to get a handle around where we needed to have space for recreation and sport activities across the district. So that open spaces strategy was actually used to inform a lot of purchases. So we tried, our strategy was to try and purchase land in advance of development, and we've done that in every town across the district through that piece of work that was done back in 2015. And the district park formed part of that in identifying the need for a large-scale space that could be used for a whole range of different things. It was then included in the 2015-25 long-term plan, and there was a budget set aside for that to purchase the land. Was arable farming prior to that. So the purchase was completed in 2016, and the land has basically been under a farming lease since it was purchased at that time. Just thinking about the large-scale park in terms of its context, so where does it fit? It's sort of at that sub-regional district level. The idea, in fact, some of the activities can potentially be regional. In terms of scope, we're looking at a whole range of different things that could potentially be provided on the site, from recreation, play, sports activities, culture and education, and a whole range of different things. It was initially thought also that it could be a site for a cemetery. That was one of the things that was actually put forward earlier on in the process, but it hasn't followed through into the work that's been done. So the site itself, it was close to key transportation routes. So we bought it before the overbridge and the CSM2 development occurred, but we knew that was going to happen. So in terms of its location in the district, it's very easy to get to from both sides of the district. It has high quality class 2 versatile soils, so the top 5% productive soils in Canterbury, so very good soils. It's actually not as flat as people think. It's quite an undulating site. It's got a lot of the old braided river forms through it, so it's a bit more undulating than people might see when you drive past. Mostly under the airport noise contour, so that's currently the airport noise contour sits over it. And when we bought it, we got an irrigation consent with it as well, which was particularly valuable in terms of the future use of the land as well, because it's very hard to get water rights nowadays. So that was one of the other reasons that it was purchased. And thinking about a large-scale park for Selwyn, there's sort of multiple benefits that can be noted. Obviously, Rollaston's heading towards city status in terms of its numbers, 50,000 people in Rollaston in about 10 years' time, I think, based on our current population projections. And having a destination park or a district park of regional significance is something that most cities or large population centres have around the place. And I think in the report that I've sent around, you'll see some examples of that. It balances the broader network of open space and is accessible to the main population centres. And it's a space with a scale that caters for just so many different recreational play and community uses. It has that scale around it that we don't have any other sites of that scale that can be developed for that sort of multitude of purposes across the district. It's an expansive, dedicated event space that can cater for existing events and new events coming. So it's got potential for that. We've got events that are currently held on a number of our parks in the Eastern Selwyn area, Selwyn Sounds, the fireworks, Diwali, those sorts of things. And having an event space going forward, I think, would be a great community benefit. It supports the economic and sustainability of the district. So having a destination type park of that size and scale with those sorts of activities on it, it really does provide a basis for indirect economic benefits into the communities around it, just with the scale and the number of people coming in for events and tournaments and all sorts of things. It helps to address the deficit in provision, both in terms of parkland and sports space, and I'll talk about that in a little more detail. It has the scale to create a bit of remoteness from the surrounding urban environment. And it also, with the sort of plantings that are envisaged, it could be the lungs for Rolleston in terms of providing a carbon sink and also a heat sink going forward. So it's one of those ones that scale, it provides the opportunity for a truly iconic park and a landmark for the district. Just in terms of planning for the park, you would have seen recently we're still the fastest growing district in the country, 2.3% a year to June 2025. As I said before, Rolleston's going to get to city status 50,000, so that's another 14,000 people in Rolleston alone from where we're sitting at the moment. So, which I think is around about just over 40% increase in Rolleston itself, without thinking about the wider district. In terms of demand for sport and recreation, it's at the moment our capacity is stretched, to say the least, and we've had this 2.5 hectares per thousand population, which is based around a national standard. We did have 3 hectares per thousand up until relatively recently, but we simply can't meet that with the population growth. That's more at the top end, so 2.5 hectares per thousand is a standard that reflects the requirements of a place like Selwyn District, which has a generally younger population and a high level of participation in sport and recreation activities across the district. We also, in terms of natural area space, we're a bit low there, and we tend to be supported by other providers like ECAN with the Waimakariri River Regional Park and DOC, although a lot of the DOC estate is not really accessible to people unless you go for a good drive, and also Christchurch City Council in terms of the Port Hills reserves, which some of them are in the district. In fact, we co-own one with Christchurch City. And ECAN, we have had some partnerships with them on development of a couple of sites, the Willows down in the Waimakariri River Regional Park, and also the West Melton Horse or Equestrian Park. So we partnered with them, and it was about trying to think of other ideas that we could to meet that sort of demand for those types of spaces. We've had an indicative development program included in the 21-31 LTP. It was actually first included in the 2018 to 28 LTP, but it was pushed out a few years. Didn't really come in until around 2021, and that was when we were anticipating getting on with the project. It was also a key project identified through our PARS strategy, Parks, Active Recreation and Sports, Spaces and Places plan, it should read, which we finished in 2023, and that was also a piece of work where we did a lot of consultation and engagement with the community to find out what was needed going forward. It was a program to support the 24-34 LTP in terms of looking at needs and demand and capacity requirements. And there's a program of 28.5 million for the first stage of the district park that's included in the 24-34 LTP. This is just to highlight, I guess, the situation we have with particularly sports space capacity. So the graph there indicates the blue line at the top is where we should be in terms of our capacity. And the dotted orange line going down, that one is for the that's the combined eastern. So what I've done here is show you both just Rolleston West Melton catchment and also the broader eastern Selwyn catchment. So if we develop the first stage of the district park, you can see the dark orangey coloured line goes up, almost reaches the level that we're trying to achieve. And if we don't do the park, then you can see it tracking down, and getting quite low. And similarly with the blue line, which reflects the Rolleston West Melton area. I've also included there just a little graph that we did. We do a survey with our sports clubs every year, which is done through James Richmond's team and their sports and recreation team, and they go out to all the clubs in the district. We get a very good response for this, and we ask questions about have they got enough space, and are we meeting their needs, those sorts of things. And you can see there in the graph there that there's a lot of clubs that are really struggling with space now, and some that are foreseeing, just with the growth that they're getting, that they're going to be struggling in the future. The latest survey we had quite a lot say to us that they're struggling. There's not enough, insufficient field space for training and games just due to the population growth. And you look at some of the stuff that's happened. We've had cricket, I think 270%. Cricket doubled in 5 years in terms of cricket numbers. And football that went up 270% over a 7-year period. And there's ongoing growth in all of those. So we're just getting so many sports, new clubs starting up, new activities starting up. We've got ones that I hadn't heard of, a year or two ago that are now looking for space and are already set up and are quite well established. And there's flag football, tag football, fistball, all these sorts of things. And you would have seen the pickleball, how that's sort of grown so quickly. And a lot of them are sports, non-contact sports that are actually played by not just younger people, but all ages and all genders, and it's quite incredible. I think a really good example is at Prebbleton, the Prebbleton five-a-side football there. They just had a few teams there a couple of years ago. So this year they had 68 teams playing on. That was at Kakaha Park. So you just see the huge impact that it's having on space, just with the growth, the population growth, and trying to meet that. Talking about the site, one of the things we're obviously aware of, since that was purchased in 2016, identified in 2009, things have changed a lot around Rolleston. There's some, in terms of both the sort of the land use patterns, and you can see the land on that map there that's now been zoned. So that's all the zoned land at the moment. And there's likely to be more land that through private plan changes and that sort of thing that will also come into the picture in the not too distant future. There's a potential for the relaxation of the airport noise contour. So that's through the regional policy statement, but that's, at the moment it still sits over the site. There's no confirmation on that. The RPS is not due for review until next year. So again, we're that's another factor to consider. And there's new infrastructure needed to support the ongoing growth, and particularly around the district park site, and that includes water supply, transportation networks, building new subdivisions they need to get from one side of the town to the other. The sort of response to that is that we're integrating this with broader spatial and infrastructure planning, particularly the Eastern Selwyn area plan work for future Selwyn that's been undertaken, and also the master plan. It's it's based around a flexible and phased development. So, and it can be seen as a park within a park. So the first stage could be standalone, for instance. And we've also considered a public transport hub on the Whedons, around the Whedons Road side of the park as well, going forward. In terms of the vision and needs assessment work that was done, so this was part of the planning for the park. We had a very expansive engagement process, an online survey. We got over 1,600 responses to that, so that was more than the LTP. The last LTP, there were about 1,500, so there was a huge degree of interest in this from the community. And there were workshops and lots of other stuff that went on to try and get as much information as we can about what people's preferences were across the district. And a report was prepared, and then that went to council, a council briefing in August 2024. Yeah. Okay, the results of that, it was really very much around wanting some natural spaces, places for active recreation, which is another part of in terms of our provision that we're probably a bit low on for active recreation. So this is like, the trails and running and cycling and those sorts of things. And then around play opportunities, and then grassy open spaces as well. I won't go into the vision, and I'll keep going as quickly as possible. The soil contamination, this is some of the work that we've done to date. So in terms of the site survey, soil contamination, a landform site assessment, the vision and needs, the draft master plan concepts, got 3 options which Hugh will talk about soon. And we've done the presentation to the Housing and Urban Development Subcommittee, and that was really just to check, are we going in the right direction or not? So that was earlier this year. And the draft consultation plan for consultation plan for the master plan options is ready to go. In terms of that, it's really just seeking feedback from the community around are we going in the right direction with this, new ideas that might come out of that process, and just get that level of feedback, try and be as expansive as possible. Our channels that we're looking at are to try and cover as much of the district as possible and get as many people engaged with the process as we can. And the audience that we're looking at is basically everyone across the district. We want to be engaged in the process going forward. Just a brief slide on the project governance and control we have for it. We want to set up a project steering group for governance for it. It'll probably form part of a broader governance group focused on Rolleston program delivery. And we'll also set up a PCG, which is more at staff level in terms of the people that need to be there, the project managers and those sort of people. But there's opportunity to co-opt people into that process as we move forward. There is an option for councillors to be part of the PSG in an advisory capacity. Where we are at the moment, obviously still in the planning phase. This is the program we've sort of got at the moment. So consult on the master plan or engagement on that in Q1 2026, and then finalise the master plan after that. Before we can actually start any work on that, we need to go through a notice of requirement to designate the site. So we're looking at that later in the year, next year. Design for the first stage, and then tendering works and physical works starting in Q2, Q3 2027 is where we are at the moment, just with those timeframes of all the work that needs to be done from design and designation, those sorts of things. Just a bit about the budget and funding. So 28.5 million, mostly 87% is funded from development contributions, from the Reserve Development Contribution Fund. And the balance is from a loan which would be met through the Reserve's targeted rate. You've got net annual operating costs when it's sort of built at about 590. It's a bit lower than Foster Park. That's because we're looking at probably not the same level of development. There's a lot of cost there with the artificial surfaces and those sorts of things. I've also shown the program there that we have at the moment. It's likely we'll be shifting this as part of the 26-27 annual plan process, simply because we won't be able to do that major build until we get to 27, 28, I think, going forward. In terms of the key elements for stage one,
I think, Mark, it might. I'm just mindful of time for the councillors. Is there? How many more slides have you got?
We've only got a couple more, which are just the concepts themselves.
Okay,
So,
I'm wondering if we actually just pause at this point and get some questions out.
I actually just had a really quick question, and it's, what is the typical cost to develop a sports field?
for a single sports field?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's probably around the sort of 300 to 400. It really depends on the soil types and all that sort of thing. If you have to put drainage in, if you're putting in ground irrigation in, depends on the contours and that sort of thing. But yeah, around 300,000 or 400,000 for a field, including all those things. And if you've got lighting on top of that, that could add another couple 100,000.
Because I just look at the budget associated in the stage one is 35 hectares, and so we're looking at about 800k a hectare to develop. And I just think, is there a space to value engineer what is actually there, and you know, trying to make the middle ground and providing for our community, and then stretching out the DCs that we do actually have for that that development. So
yeah,
whether that, I mean, anyway, I'll let other people comment. Reece.
Yeah, good point. So, yeah, I was just taking notes, and I probably might sound negative for a starter. I absolutely understand what the community needs and where it is, and I'd like to be able to find the middle ground myself. But yeah, the operating costs of 590 annually, the purchase costs, and then 108 million in the report over 30 years is another 3.36 annually. And I understand, it's adding up, and I just wonder if we could get some information around, and it might be available. I haven't seen it. Sorry, that's 1,665 submissions back. What information were they given on these costings? Did they have this information if they saw that this was going to make this sort of impact to their rates versus what they got from it? That's absolutely what we're here to do, is to talk to the community and let them have that information. And I'm just wondering whether the positive results from that survey was fully informed.
Yeah, in terms of the costing for the process that we went through was a needs envisioning assessment. So it's about understanding what the community wants. So that's the first part of the process. The next part is when we get into the master planning process, where we have a better idea of what the costs are. The other thing I would say is that all of these costs have gone through the long-term plan processes. So that's been for 3 years in 3 successive LTPs in terms of the actual costs. So, or the indicative costs that we had identified for this project going forward. The other thing I would say is that in terms of this is over 10 years, so this cost is around when we get to the full, in terms of the operating costs, is when we get to it fully developed. Over that time, there's 14,000 more people coming into the district, and this is a growth project. So it's designed to meet the needs of people as they come into the district. As those people come into the district, they're also ratepayers. So we're building our ratepayer base as well. So it's not going to add, you know, a huge amount of money onto that if you've got a building ratepayer base as well. So there is that aspect to consider with it. So and in terms of the actual cost of it, it's mostly DC funded in terms of capital cost.
So a further question to that was the irrigation consent that comes with the land. What sort of cubes is that, or how many units is that?
It's 500,000 cubic metres of water per year. So it's a very extensive one to cover that whole site.
Yep. Yeah. And it was, I just said other questions around further funding investigations. So you mentioned the transport hub or the park and ride and those sorts of things. Has there been any forecasting put into those on offsets of costs, and were they included in the 108 million as the budget? The 100 million, 100.8 by 30 over 30 years.
No, it's separate project altogether. The 108, we're expecting the total cost of it, if we were building the whole 100 hectares, to be more like about 80 million. As an example, Foster Park cost us for about 30 hectares over, I think it's 32 million to build that park. And that's excluding the Selwyn Sports Centre. So it's actually going to be a bit cheaper because of the type of development that we're doing here than that. But that's the magnitude of cost that you're looking at.
Yeah, well, I'm just taking it off there on point E of one of your pages. It said 100 million, so I appreciate that. Thank you.
Cool. Tracy?
I won't keep you for an hour. I'll try to be brief. The first thing I've got a couple of comments to make, and one is that if you ask a sports club if they've got enough of something, they will always tell you no. And necessity is the mother of invention, and my experience in sport is that if you constantly give people stuff, they will always want more. And so in some ways it's better to look at the people who did well with less as your guiding light in how you might use future land. So for example, I would be more supportive of sports fields that are part of a genuine hub, a hub that is not dominated by rugby or cricket, where there is genuinely a sharing of all facilities and all fields, because as long as I've been on the planet, and it's over 50 years, that hasn't been the case. Those two sports dominate. We live in a time of increasingly changing ways to be active, and you mentioned that Selwyn has a very young population under 30, and all the data that comes out of places like Sport New Zealand, and has done for 30 years, is that young people are changing how they play, and organised sport as we know it, cricket, rugby, football, are changing to shorter games and so on. So that's one comment, and that alone could be really long, so I won't. I have a concern about an event type centre, and the concern I have is that in New Zealand, where our parochialism is making us broke, everybody has to have an event centre, and everybody has to have a stadium, and everybody has to have a port who's got water, and so on. And what ends up happening is everybody, all the people who want to use those facilities, play off the other city, the other town or whatever to get a lower price at that one. You used the example of Selwyn Sounds. Selwyn Sounds is currently a really good event into Lincoln. But you used it as an example of an event that might well use this space. So suddenly economic development and prosperity for Lincoln off an event is moving to the district park. So I would just throw that into the mix as well, that we need to be careful about moving events from other parts of the district and into Rolleston for Rolleston's economic prosperity at the cost of other places that are growing. So as I've mentioned Lincoln, I'll continue. Lincoln has a huge deficit of sports playing fields, and asking parents to get in their cars to drive to the district park is going to add to what is already pretty poor congested roads and stuff, and also a lot of parents work. So how are their kids going to get from school to Rolleston and so on? So yes, I have concerns about a Rolleston-centric thinking here. I'm not anti-Rolleston before all my friends on Facebook start getting ready to troll me tonight. But we're here for balance, and calling it a district park doesn't make it a district park. So that's a comment I'd make there. I think we can all agree that by the time this is finished, it won't be remote. It will be surrounded by houses. And that's one reason why we have it. So I'm not against green spaces. I think green spaces are fantastic, and the people of Rolleston deserve to have them as they grow. I would just draw our attention to the results of your survey, which was ranked first, second, third and fourth, and just draw people's attention to sports fields being clearly fourth. And again, I know this isn't going to make me friends, particularly in the area I've come from, but we need to listen to our district. And are there other ways that we can meet some of the first, second or third other than through this park? I'm just moving along quickly because I know you don't all want to listen to me, so you probably don't want me as one of your potential councillor advisors. I'd love to be. I wanted to ask about the development contributions. A lot's been said about the development contributions that are tagged for this project. Are you able to clarify for me that these are development contribution reserve funds that have to be applied to a reserve in Rolleston? Or is it part of a district-wide fund, which is where my suspicion is, because it's been called a district park, that these are actually reserve funds for the district and may well be able to use in other places? So that's where I'll finish, because that's a question. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for that. In terms of the development contributions, so the process for development contributions is that we have to identify all of our growth projects across the district, and we work out the proportion of those that can be attributed to the growth community. So a percentage is worked out based on a causation and benefit approach, and there's guidelines around that are produced by the Department of Internal Affairs in terms of how we do that. And then those particular projects, or the cost of those projects, and the proportion that is DC funded, we have to have localities in terms of, in this case we have 3 localities. So we have an Eastern Selwyn locality, an account, we have a Northwest and we have a Southwest account. And all of those, for each of those areas, all of those projects are added up in terms of the cost for them. And then we work out what the HUI charge is, so that's the household unit equivalent, which is then on charge to developers. But each of those projects that we put in there has to be a costed project, an identified project, which goes into a schedule in the LTP. So this is all done as part of the LTP process. And then the HUI charges are applied. It goes into any of the funds that are received through that process then go into that Eastern Selwyn Fund or the Northwest Fund or the Southwest Fund. But they're there specifically to pay for those projects that have been identified through the LTP process. So
is the answer to the question, yes, the development contributions that have been allocated to this project can only be used for this project. The project can't be cancelled and another project use those funds, because that was the question.
Yeah. So if the project took a different sort of direction, then you can still use those funds for that particular project. If it's a project that's meeting that district need in terms of sport and recreation requirement going forward, potentially a different site even, or somewhere else, whatever it is. But it comes back to that we have taken funds for a district park, and the form of that district park, whatever that is going forward, we need to spend the funds on that.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tracy.
Just to jump in on the event space. When we get to the concepts you've seen, but it's not a built event stadium or anything like that. Perfect, cool. And the other responses that we got from the visioning needs assessment, those things are taken into account for the concepts that we've put forward.
Thanks, Hugh. Aaron.
Thanks very much for your presentation. I'll preface my comments with saying I generally support the notion of a park. It's just the finer details, so don't take this negatively or too negatively, if you like. Tracy has covered quite a few of the things that I raised, so I'll have to skim through and eliminate the things that I don't need to ask anymore. I guess leading on from where Tracy was getting to, and Broadfield Gardens, which you'll know is potentially for sale just down the road, wasn't on the agenda, wasn't available at the time that the park plans were developed, right? Subsequently, it has become available, and so now there is thinking, well, can that be placed into the mix to deliver to the natural space priority, which was the number one priority from the consultation that you did, and then we're trading off parts of, I guess, the ability to trade off some of the stuff that would be done in the district park according to the options that you've got available now, putting an option on the table that would incorporate the possible purchase of Broadfield Gardens. Is that a path we can explore?
Yeah, we have discussed this amongst staff around how we could do this, but obviously Broadfield Gardens, it's not a natural space. It's a formal garden. Just to be clear about that, it's it is a beautiful garden, and certainly in terms of a formal garden space, it's only 4.9 hectares. It's not a big space. It's not going to cater for the things that were identified through the needs assessment in terms of active recreation spaces and those sorts of things, which are trails and natural, within a sort of natural outdoor adventure type environment. Certainly not that, but it certainly has a lot of merit in terms of that formal garden space. Whether it's, in terms of applying development contributions to that is a little bit more difficult. It's already there, it's been built, purchasing it. We'd have to do assessment on that. It'd have to be a project that would go through either an annual plan or a long-term plan process around that. And whether some of the funds could be directed towards that. I'm aware of, it was in the Selwyn Times anyway, so I can talk about it, that land quite close to that, 160 hectare block has been purchased, which, and that might provide other opportunities as well going forward. It certainly provides some of the I guess, reservations we had about Broadfield Gardens in terms of its proximity and that and disconnection with the residential side of things could potentially be solved, but that has to go through a long-term private plan change process that may or may not be successful. So that's, yeah. So, yeah, it is something that we have talked about. It's something that there is obviously an opportunity to have a look at that going forward, definitely.
Thank you. Could we see a bit finer level, well, not a fine level, but a bit finer level breakdown of the annual budgets that you've got? You know, the 1.5 this year is not so much a concern, but the 9 million chunk, break that into a few chunks of where the spend is going over the next 3 to 5 years, perhaps?
Yeah, we can certainly provide that if you want that.
And that's probably everything that I want to add to Tracy's comments. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Aaron. Elizabeth.
The 10% that are struggling for space, is it indoor or outdoor space? I'm presuming outdoor if they're talking about an outdoor park here. But could we have a breakdown of list of those groups from James, please? I presume James was involved with that, or whoever's got that information. And again, the list of the sports also in a separate, a list of the sports that you have considered catering for in this park, not just at the first stage, but maybe break it into the different stages. You have horses as one of those sports. I don't know if that's a given or a futuristic idea, but given the location, I mean, horses is obviously my bread and butter. Given the location, that would be the equivalent of me driving my horse float to Hagley Park and riding around Hagley Park. I would love to do that, but it wouldn't be the wisest move. So obviously, Aaron, it's already been asked about the DCs being transferred. So that's covered. What balance have the DCs that have been collected for already, given this has been in a long-term plan for quite some time? What's the balance on that, and how much is left to be collected to reach your overall costings?
Just one thing to clarify in terms of the sport survey that's done. So we get, it's an annual survey, all the clubs are surveyed around it. It gives us an indication. But beyond that, we also get, because as was mentioned before, a lot of the sports clubs will give you information to say they haven't got enough space, or they've got so many members, or whatever it is. So we actually do a separate process where we look at the actual draws, so we can work out the numbers that are actually playing, and then look at that in terms of our space. So we do that. We're actually just about to do that again moving forward to get an updated picture of where we are with that. And that gives us much better information around the actual levels of utilisation. And also the team is also, now that we have a booking in place, we're actually getting a much better picture around the use of both our outdoor courts and outdoor fields. So we're getting much better information around that, and we can see, you can actually see some of the issues that are there. Some of the fields that we're getting are just getting absolutely hammered, so we're having to spend more money on them because there isn't enough space for training, there isn't enough space for playing. So we know that. One thing to also say is the district park is not about just sports. Sports is one element for it. It's actually about creating a space that was going to be large enough in terms of scale to have a whole lot of other recreation activities on it. And it's not a Hagley Park, for instance. It's very much a more natural space. So that was sort of one of the whole ideas behind it, and that's what came through in the information that we got from the community when we went out and asked around the visioning and needs assessment aspect to it. In terms of your question around how much have we collected and how much more? Well, it's over the next 10 years that we'll be collecting the balance of it. There won't be a lot in there at the moment. I'd have to do a calculation to work that out, but Obviously, as we go forward, we've got another 10 years to get those funds. One thing I can tell you is the current balance in the Eastern account is about 36.2 million, which has been accrued for various projects as well around the district. The other one I just addressed too is the question around Lincoln, and that in terms of Lincoln, we bought land to expand Lincoln Domain. That's also one of the projects that we have. So we've got another 5.7 hectares being developed over the next couple of years there, as well as the road going through to connect through to Broadlands Drive. We've also got the second stage of Kakaha Park, which is about a 2-minute drive from Lincoln and is on the rail trail. That's another, and that site will be about 22 hectares when that's fully developed. At the moment we've done about 13 hectares, so there's more land to be developed there. So Lincoln is getting some stuff happening in that space as well. It's not just all about Rolleston, and the district park is not about sport either. So I just make those comments.
Thanks, Mark. Sophie.
Yeah. Kia ora, guys. And kind of along those lines as well, like for an event like Selwyn Sounds, it's run by a commercial entity, so they will actually choose where they want to go. If they don't want to leave Lincoln, they don't have to. I mean, there's plenty of festivals that move around, but yeah. I guess in terms of surveys, it's always interesting because it's kind of people who aren't, it's a bit like a long-term plan, honestly. It's the people who take part in them are self-selected. They have something to say and they want to say it. So they're really good, but it doesn't necessarily show whatever, but we still have to use surveys to get information from people. Anyway, I do have an actual question. I've got 2 questions. So we've dealt with the DCs, which is great, and the operational costs. Just wondering, because something else that we set through an annual plan or a long-term plan is the cost of using fields, or for hiring for events and that sort of thing. And I'm just wondering whether, when we're working out the operational costs, have we taken any look at how much the income might be from these sorts of things? I mean, in terms of events, actually, because it's a bigger park, potentially organisers would have smaller traffic management plans, for instance, because you don't have to necessarily close roads. So that's question number 1.
Yeah, we've done an estimate. It's really difficult at the moment because we haven't done the design or anything like that. But we have done an estimate which shows around $70,000 that we expect to get back in revenues. Foster Park generates about $80,000 in revenue, but that's mostly from the artificial playing surfaces. That's where most of the revenue comes from there. If we did charge for playing fields, for instance, at the moment we have a only charge where lighting is provided. The others are at no cost. If we do, although in saying that, the clubs actually do a lot of work that we don't have to do in line marking and those sorts of things, so that reduces our overall cost. And if you start charging for playing fields and that, then you often end up marginalising some people in terms of, because it just gets passed on to the clubs and then they pass it on to the players. So, and in the scheme of things, it's not a lot. But yeah, certainly there's revenue to be gained from the events and things like that could occur. And I guess there's also the indirect economic benefits of having those sorts of things in the district. Talking to the events manager a couple of days ago, he said that we have been missing out on events in Selwyn simply because we don't have any places for it. So, which was an interesting comment.
Were there any particular kinds of events?
Not off the top of my head, I can't remember. He just made that comment that there were some events that had gone elsewhere because.
Yeah. I know when Rolling Meadows decided to leave Waipara, they did look at Selwyn, but they never followed through on that one. So, and my other question was, something else Tracy mentioned was around a hub. So I was just wondering, in terms of when we're looking at the organisation of, how there was the slide that had things like the steering group, but also the control group. Like, is there potential for maybe including like a kernel of local users to be part of one of those groups, with the intention of it following through to some sort of hub organisation that would have more buy-in from a range of users?
Yeah, absolutely. And we're, in terms of Tracy's question or comment around that, we're certainly also of the view that we want to make our parks as open to as many as possible and not have them dominated by particular groups going forward. And I think Kakaha Park has been a really good example of that, in terms of there's no fields that are allocated to particular groups, and we don't no clubs that have buildings or anything on there that get that sense of entitlement around the space around it. So certainly going forward, we'd be looking at the same sort of approach to things, and the idea of the hub was the Lincoln Hub, which has been talked about. Those sorts of things are really, really good in terms of getting some local community people involved and some of the groups involved in actually making the thing work going forward. So, and also potentially reducing costs. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Sophie. Sarah.
Thank you, Mark, for the opportunity to talk through this. I see, us meeting those recreational ratios as a really important part of our job, in terms of community and connection and wellbeing at the very least. And in terms of, travelling to sports, any sports family will know that you travel from Glen Tunnel to Little River and Akaroa and so on. It's sort of part and parcel of your kids playing sport. I also, I guess, around youth strategy, I see this as being a really important one. Certainly Sport Canterbury have talked about the importance of unstructured sports and unstructured recreational opportunities for our rangatahi, in terms of their connection and their wellbeing. It's a really valuable space for them, and I kind of see this as fitting quite nicely in there. Question for you is around, do we have any sort of usage numbers that we would expect across the different activities for the park? Because certainly you'd want to justify all of this budget on making sure that we've got the numbers through the gates.
Yeah, I think in terms of like the event space, I think is, what about 10,000? 20. Yeah, 20. 20,000. Yeah, so it can up to 20,000 people. At this stage, the concepts in terms of sports space is not a huge amount of space, but we're actually reflecting on that, and there might be a rebalancing, particularly if we go out to consultation on it and get feedback around that. But in terms of the sports numbers that we're looking at, it's really hard to gauge those, but we just know that we know already we're doing all sorts of things to try and fit people in around the place. Like we just did a little cricket ground over at Highgate Park over here, just because of we can't, and we're putting more wickets in places and trying to fit people in as best we can, but you can only do that. We've only got space for that for so long, and we work with other organisations in that as well, in terms of space. So so in terms of those numbers, we just know that the sort of the 10% per year, 5% per year increases that we're getting all the time with the sports and the population. If you think of 34,000 something people in Rolleston at the moment, and there's another 14,000 coming in the next 10 years, and a lot of those will be families, and they'll have people that want to get into sport. One of the other things that we are cognizant of when we're doing this sort of work is about future-proofing, so that we're able to look at spaces. Even Foster Park, when we did that originally, that was about future-proofing as well, in terms of as things change over time, and some of the traditional sports that might not be so popular going forward, that we can actually reutilise those spaces and do something different on them. So that is part of the whole package as well. Yep.
Thank you.
Just in terms of the event space, in each concept we've got about 5 hectares allocated, but the idea is that it's very much multi-use and would be used for overflow for sports fields as well.
Cool, thanks. And last one, Denise.
Okay. I know it's hard because there's sort of, like you've alluded to, changing goalposts and what have you. But I was thinking about Lydia's point of that 800k per hectare. And then looking at your survey, sorry, this will come together into something in a minute. Your online survey has got first priority for people was natural plantings in an area including large trees for shade, beautification. Native plants were popular, but there was also exotic and botanic plants were valued. Throughout your whole report, it only refers to native plantings and grass areas. And I think coming back to what Tracy said is that formalised sport was kind of like the lowest of the priorities. So it seems like people really want sort of an open park with natural areas with tracks and walking, and for those types of informal things, that's what I'm envisaging and that it looks like. But is there a possibility of bringing the cost per hectare down and balancing it with the idea from Erin about Broadfield Gardens, because that would fulfil the botanical side of it, exotic plantings, what have you, which I think we couldn't afford to do because it's, you know, way beyond what the price of that park is. And somehow have some sort of compromise between the two where we also look at bringing the future costs of the whole thing down. That's not a question really, that was a statement. Sorry, thank you.
Did you want me to comment on that or not?
Yeah, I don't know. I think that I could probably take the lead on this one. I think it is. I think it's really hard, right? Like, you know, you say this has been 16 years in the planning, and you try and look ahead to the future and as best you can, and that, you know, we can often be in quite volatile situations of changing views around council table and what we do with that. And so my view is that we don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. I think that we need to value engineer some of this as to what is acceptable for our community, noting that most of it is DC funded, but we're still going to be pretty vigilant with what we do have. And the other side of it is that allowing new councillors to bring ideas to the table to discuss those. So noting that this isn't a decision-making forum, this is a briefing. We've gone well over time, and I thank you guys for coming and having a yarn to us and telling us from your side how things are going and what the plan looks like. But I think for us there's a bit of work to do in that space.
Just a quick comment on the planting. So the report might talk more about natives, but very much, the natives, but very much there's exotics incorporated throughout as well. So that was one of the key things that we got through, was people wanted to see seasonality. Exotics are much faster growing than most of our natives, give you the sense of scale too. So very much something that we've looked at through development of the concepts.
Cool. With that, we will call today closed. So thank you everyone for your attendance and your attention for the day. And see you next time.